All right, welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 21st day of June 2022. And as we to listen to what Wafula Chebukati was saying yesterday, I want to introduce the Speaker of Nandi County Assembly, that is Joshua Kipto. Good morning.
Good morning.
Tumekuhata kidogo.
No problem, I'm here.
Great. And of course, we've been talking about the road to election and the statement from IEBC yesterday, which I want us to listen to now. That is in as far as the preparations and what has to do with the voter register, the final one. Listen.
You might have witnessed that some of them were actually complaining, even in the media, especially that time when you gave them opportunity to go and verify themselves. Now, right away, even as we speak, inspection of the register of voter is still continuous. Means that you can be able to check through SMS platform as well as a web portal to check your state.
Our suspect, about 3 officers, we are actually finalizing investigations and they'll be apprehended to face the law. Especially in those areas the CEO has mentioned.
In the electronic KIMS kit, when a voter comes and has been identified, that record is archived. You cannot come again and use identified to come and vote again. But in digital, in physical register, it's even possible because it depends on the collusion. The people who are actually there, you can even strike again the same voter who has actually been who has already voted, and therefore this one gives you assurance that once you have already voted, your record is archived. You cannot come again. If you come again, the KIMS kit is actually going to alarm and make noise, and people are going to confirm what is this all about.
All right, that is Hussein Marjan explaining what they will do and why they want a digital register only without any backup of a physical document. They were saying that at times there would be collusion at police stations, and you find that the presiding officers are working with certain agents or interested persons to check the identity card of people that have not voted, identify them on the KIMS kit and allow someone else to vote for them. Speaker Kipto, are you satisfied with the explanation, especially on how we ended up at 22.1 million voters, but also the question of having just the digital register in this election?
Thank you very much, and I want to sincerely apologize for coming late. But what was of importance is I think I was picking the statement being given by IEBC, and they were giving us the figures. One of the concerns I have is that when it comes to a digital register, I don't know if they were able to answer that question, and they have been on record speaking about up to a third of the polling station not being equipped with the 4G or the 3G network, and I think they had offered a possible solution saying that they'll be using satellite phone. So what happens to them? Because that one presents a possible problem of the kids failing, and that is something that I think in 2013 was an issue. If you look at our Supreme Court decision of the presidential petition in 2017, one of the major considerations was failure of technology, and if you remember, one of the bases for nullification was on that, and on this one, IEBC cannot have any reason to mess up when it comes to the KIMS kit. That is an important element. Number two, which is of importance, you've raised about the numbers, which I think when I was joining site, I could hear my colleagues speaking about the concern that was raised by Kenya Kwanza, I think, team, when they were presenting the presidential nomination papers for the deputy president. They had raised about their 1 million votes. And at that time, IEBC had the benefit of doubt. The audit results of KPMG had just been released, and they say they have taken note of the same, and they are working on that. What became of that? And I think my concern would be the same way they were accepting papers from the presidential candidates, and the openness and the way the media was involved, the parties were involved, I feel there's a small gap missing when it comes to this issue of the voter register, because each of the leading coalitions and parties were able to appoint liaison people. Why is it not easy for example, IEBC to involve these particular stakeholders, importantly bring in the media, and this is something I've been arguing on set over and over again. I think it's high time for IEBC IEBC to set up a permanent communication table,
right,
which will now make it easy for such concerns be handled within a timely manner. Because what happens is that the media will be invited, like yesterday. It was just a 1 hour or 2 hour session, which more or less is like a talk-down session where the commissioners and the IEBC team will just be answering questions, and you'll not have enough time as a media to be able to raise all these concerns. We'll go quiet for the next 1 week. When another issue comes up again, we come back to the table. So my concern would be, why don't we have, now that Bomas has been ring-fenced and set up for IEBC, why don't we have, even if it is every 3 days, there's a media brief and the stakeholders are involved, so that you are just trying to infuse confidence into the process. When the stakeholders are part and parcel of it, for example, if Kenya Kwanza raised the issue of the 1 million voters and IEBC acknowledge and they say they'll work on it, they have come back and said that they've been able to clean up 400,000. I would be very happy, for example, if you have the stakeholders on board, they have already been taken through the process, so that as at the time a statement is being read, the person who raised the complaint and the media being the watchdog there will be on the same page and say, fine, now we understand there was a concern for 1 million, now it's 400,000.
Okay.
So lastly, my issue would be, we are at the tail end of the process. Election is normally a process. It's not a one-day affair. Now that with the limited time we have, it's about perception, it's about confidence building. Let us work on this assumption or basis that IEBC has already guaranteed that the digital voter register will not have a hitch. Yesterday I was arguing and I gave a proposition. If you have a polling station of 450 voters, and the first 50 voters come in, because the crunch time for the election is the first 30 minutes and possibly towards the end. If in the first 30 minutes 50 voters came in and 10 of them couldn't find their details, already tension develops within that area. And then now that we are in a digital age where these parties have, in fact, most of the coalitions have actually given indication that they'll have their people at every polling station and send real-time data. So you can imagine someone sharing on social media that I've not been able to get my details, or someone says, I'm supposed to vote in Nandi, for example, in Tindret, and then I find my voter details reading Wajir. If 10 people now, for example, complain and stops the process, and then the same is replicated across, let's say, another 50 polling stations at the same time, that already foments a crisis. What can IEBC do if there's no backup for the digital register?
Okay. All right. Of course, those are some of the scenarios that these stakeholders who are the Bomas of Kenya are trying to resolve, especially talking about the law requiring a complementary mechanism. But also, there are key issues that we need to distinguish here. Kenya Kwanza, that is, William Ruto told the ambassadors of EU that they hear there is close to 1 million registered voters in their strongholds that have been removed from the register. A few days later, KPMG alongside IEBC came out and said that, yes, we've noticed issues, but not necessarily deletion, because it's not easy to delete anyone from the voters register. But Joshua, when you reflect, that is yourself from Creco, when you reflect on the resolution of those issues, because even if you look at page 4 of the Standard, you'll see some of the key issues for out of 226,000 records that didn't match documentation issues issued by the National Registration Bureau. 172,000 remain unresolved. If you talk about 481,000 duplicate records, 144,000 still remain unresolved. So many of these now have been put back in the register, meaning they're also saying that on the day of voting, they'll be in a position to use biometrics so that you're sure the only person who votes is the person that is registered. Is it satisfying for you?
Thank you very much, Sami. Let me echo the sentiments by my namesake that the voters register is the pillar of any election. The pillar in the sense that it is bringing together all actors of an election, be it media, candidates, IEBC officials, political party agents, independent candidates, voters, and even observers, both international and domestic. The voters register is what gives the, the meaning of an election. And the information surrounding the voters register needs to be handled very carefully, in the sense that information surrounding the voters register should be communicated very well to each of these actors in a way that there is no distortion of information, there is clarity, and there is even confidence by the voters that when I check into a polling station, let's say, for instance, Kipteber primary school. I am going there regardless whether there is network or there is no network, but my sovereign right or civil and political right, I will be able to exercise that without any entrance. And let me revisit the issue.
The question of network, the KIMS kit does not require network. It will be offline. It will be depend on an SD card. It is only required to be connected when transmitting the presidential.
Yes, but of course, voting will be meaningful if it is fully transmitted.
Yes.
To the tallying center, because that is where the declarations will be made. But let's reflect on 2017, where 36,000 Kenyans were not able to identify themselves electronically, using the gadgets that were provided for in the polling stations. But there was a means which they were unable to vote. But we ask ourselves, the absence of the manual register, what are the alternative means of this voter identification in the polling station? Because let's be practical, in our day-to-day lives, some of the contributing factors could be probably the kind of the jobs that Kenyans do that do not enable them to identify their biometrics. Probably it is manual labor in the Juakali sector. Or probably people with disability, probably they no longer have sections of their bodies that could could be used to identify themselves using these machines. I mean, those are factors. I mean, and they're critical factors.
Doesn't it suffice then that the document you have, whether it's a passport or ID, the alphanumeric data can be searched on the KIMS kit?
But now that is what IEBC needs to tell us, that will be the avenue of identification of a voter. Okay. Because that's not very clear as it is now. Because Kenyans are used to the old ways of, the practice. 2013, 2017, when there is a shift in terms of how things are supposed to be done, they must be clearly communicated.
Okay, let me hear from Herman. When you look at what they are doing, especially because the digital register is becoming such an issue, and it was even at the Bomas of Kenya yesterday. So the risk that someone might manipulate the system if they have a physical document, is it too high to the extent that you remove the physical register and people just come and identify themselves despite the challenges like what he's describing, on a balance? What's the better evil?
I think if you, excuse me, I think if you use both, you could create confusion. You could also create room for people to manipulate the system. So I think once you've gone the electronic way, stick there. So what we should then be saying, can we make sure the gadgets work, period, including concerns raised by Joshua from CRECO, that there will be people with some issues that will make it difficult for them to be identified. There should be mitigation for that. So I think, for me, once we have chosen to go electronic, we must remain electronic. And the onus is on IEBC and the country to ensure that the gadgets we have are really gadgets and they work. That's what I would think. Instead of having, you are stepping forward and you want also to step back to the manual register. Either you have manual or electronic. In between could create a problem, in my thinking. Okay. Just make sure the gadgets work. But I would also have urged the politicians to ensure this time they take advantage of that also. Because one of the things that creates rigging is, at the end of the day, when people look around and they see people have now left the polling station, we only have 2 or 3 people here voting, and we have like 1 hour to go. And we look at each other and we know each other. Then we vote. So
you've witnessed that?
Of course, that's happened, and Krigler told us, what's your problem? That's all.
No, it's wrong.
If you are too young, we know, we see it. Now we look, naangaliana, hapa sisi tuko wenyewe, tunajaza zile zingine. How do we mitigate that? And I'm arguing we should have periodic reportings. So that
of how many have voted? Yeah,
you see, in an hour, 50 have voted. In another hour, 30, therefore we have 80. So by the time we get to the injury time, we know out of the 450 in a polling station, 250 have voted. There is no way another 200 can vote in the remaining 30 minutes or 1 hour. Stuff like that. That's what politicians should do.
Well, that's interesting. And I don't know if you have any supplementary thoughts about this, because I want us to transition to the question of the clearance of candidates. Do you?
No, maybe the extra thing I think I would want to say is that election process is all about perception and confidence. We can have different opinions, but what matters at the end of the day, just have confidence in the process. And the confidence can only be instilled by IEBC itself. You know, these questions we are raising are questions that can well be dispelled if there's that real-time channel of communication. And I've been insisting on that because that is what Kriegler Commission recommended. And in the past elections, 2013, 2017, if there is no seamless flow of communication right from the voting to transmission of results, that is when you are able to create a perception that the process is not free, fair. And going by the precedent set by the court in 2017, the process is what matters. And any mishap, right from the voting to transmission of the results or relaying of the results, any mishap will have the elections being nullified. And that was the basis of nullification in 2017 because of these issues that we are raising here. So I think IBC should take this very seriously and be able to have a very close working relationship with the media as well as the stakeholders. The primary stakeholders are the same politicians because those are the primary clientele as we speak right now. If the two major coalitions, Kenya Kwanza and Azimio, have, and of course the other players, downstream tickets, governor to MCA, when there is that seamless, and you've been seeing them doing briefings with aspirants, why don't we make it a process? Because we only have 45 days. If we can have a continuous process and the media being given a decision to assess, we don't want a case where Bomas of Kenya will again be cordoned off and be declared a security zone, where you are fed with drip information, not consistent, and maybe media, they only give 1 or 2 accredited media, and that one now creates the perception that what is exactly happening. So that will be my proposal, and I think we still have enough time to be able to allay any of these fears and be able to answer the concern, so that 3 weeks to the election, there can be confidence that at least 2022 will be different.
All right, and of course the IBC officials yesterday said that 2 issues. First, that for the transfers that would appear to have been illegal, there are some 3 officials who are being investigated, and soon action will be taken against them. But also something else is about the question of another simulation in a month's time, or rather 1 month to the general election. IBC hopes to repeat the simulation of the election results transmission from the polling stations to the National Tallying Center. And this is coming after those challenges that were witnessed when there was a success rate of about 40–45%. But also, as this goes on, the process of clearing with the disputes appears to have been concluded. There is the matter of Mike Sonko, who was going for the seat of governor of Mombasa. He was told that he cannot run because of Article 75 of the Constitution having been removed from office, but also the question of his degree certificate that he didn't present a certified copy. For Johnson Sakaja still, he was writing a statement to the DCI yesterday about the authenticity of his degree certificate. Karungo Thangwa is obviously out for now because the Dispute Resolution Committee agreed with the returning officer in Kiambu that indeed he had been removed from office and therefore cannot run for state office. Are you satisfied, Joshua, from CRECO, with the process of dispute resolution? And even now, as we move on to the next phase, what options exist, especially for the candidates barred, but also what does the system say for us in as far as dealing with such matters with finality at a time that IBC is saying they have no mandate, no power to really authenticate a degree certificate?
Yes, thanks, Sami. The electoral process cannot sacrifice integrity just for purposes of, appeasing people who have questionable character to ascend into political office. We must safeguard our leadership, especially the public leadership, at the county level and at the national level, to have people who can remain a test of time by safeguarding their images and even their actions in terms of integrity. We've been championing for IEBC not to allow and clear these, candidates who have either cases in court or who have been mentioned by the ESCC or who have been suspected even to be engaged in malpractices. And I think the process has been, has really gained a lot of conversation around our country, even at the village level, where people are discussing that, you know, you need to be someone of, good moral standing in society in order to be given an opportunity. Because remember, these are the people who will be presiding over our taxes, our legislation, our representation, and even overseeing the welfare of our people, you know, on a day-to-day, because after a 5-year cycle is when people have the mandate now to renew or to get new
but the same Kenyans,
elections.
The same Kenyans sometimes will say, let us decide. Let us be the ones to decide.
Yeah, but I agree with that, because, you know, these leaders don't come from outside our society. They mirror actually who we are in our society. But again, it still also goes to the voters that let's get the best of our communities to be in these spaces of the political leadership. But for me, what dissatisfies me is the perception around probably some people have been cleared and others have not been cleared. The fairness in it, so that we do not have politics. You know, there is now the politicization of clearing of candidates. And I would not have wanted to see that because, again, it injures, the spirit and the belief by the voters that, the entities that have been put in place to administer or manage our elections are persons of, are institutions of credibility, that their ruling is impartial. It has nothing to do with politics. But you see now, the conversations around the non-clearance and clearance has been politicized. Me, I would want this thing to be just a preserve of the independent institutions that has been given the mandate by the Constitution of Kenya.
Do you see any politics in the institutions that have been managing this?
You can see from these current conversations that some political divide is crying a fall, that, there are people are being targeted and others are being cleared, so that kind of stuff. Probably there should have been a means, and of course this is also about public participation, about having clarity on the process.
Okay.
Why was this being done? Why are the issue of the degrees now even emerging during near an election? Why should it not have been something that is continuous? So that it's not about ticking the boxes, and saying that we've done this. And you can see the various institutions are not reading from the same script. IBC says we've cleared, DCI still says we are following.
Okay, Herman, because you work at the university, so you would know a good certificate and one that is not. What should happen moving forward? Because you find that in this country, we do things so close to the deadline. What should happen so that these institutions, if it's IBC, has enough time to speak to other institutions to verify the credibility of documentation or information presented to them?
I think this is a very simple issue. Like the issue of a degree is a very simple issue. You either have a degree or you don't have it. Why do Kenyans like wasting time on simple things? A degree, some you have it or you don't have it. IBC is sitting hours on end, wasting taxpayers' money, only to come and tell us we have no way of verification. But nobody asked them to verify. The law says it's Q to do it. So if there is a dispute about a certificate, why are you sitting to talk about it? Why don't you just take it to Q and wait for the report from Q? And the report from Q then binds IBC. It can only be dealt with in court. I'm not a lawyer. But IBC is bound by whatever decision is made by Q. Why are you sitting to waste our money? What are you talking about? I even sometimes, Sam, I get...
I thought they call it fair hearing.
What a fair hearing? There is no hearing about a degree. Why would the courts entertain somebody's degree issue for 3 years? You don't have a Form 4 certificate, degree. How? You either went to school and got a certificate or you didn't go. You are Sudi, you are Intuli, you are whoever you are. It's not, look, Sam, you know this country, you are joking. NEC, Kenya National Examination Council, comes to say Joshua did not do this Form 4 certificate. We don't know it. It's not in our system. The principal, Joshua here, comes to say his certificate ya Form 4 hii, ya huyu mwanafunzi hakukuwa wetu. I was the principal. We didn't have such a student. NEC goes further to tell you that center, there's a center number on the certificate. We don't have such a number. They go further to tell you even that school was not there at that time. And the courts are still sitting on the matter. You know, our courts sometimes, look at the issue of Sonko, for example. The issue Sonko is raising is one that there's a pending appeal. The appeal is in the Supreme Court. Why is it so difficult for the registrar of the High Court or the Supreme Court to just write to IBC, returning officer? Indeed, it is true. We have this appeal from Sonko pending. But more importantly, what is the Supreme Court sitting on the appeal? What is it doing? This is something the Supreme Court can decide in 2 minutes. So I think questions of degree or certificate, we are actually just taking Kenyans for a ride. But finally, if you ask me, we don't need those laws. We don't need a law to say somebody must have a degree. It's meaningless, it's useless for many reasons. 2 reasons I'll give you now. One, there is no direct correlation between a degree and ability in leadership. If you want to be a doctor, we shall need you to be educated. But leadership you can do without a degree. In any case, the world is full of examples, some, of men and women who never went to school or went minimally to school. And have
you would say the same even
and they have done great things.
You would say the same even if you are a leader with executive duties of running a government.
People have run governments. How many presidents have we had in the US? About 15. More than half of them never had a degree. So what are you talking about? The greatest, the greatest power on earth.
If you have to be contextual in Kenya.
Yes. Moi was there for 24 years. When other countries around us were collapsing, Moi was there. He didn't have a degree. Forget about even a degree. Secondary school education didn't have. There is no correlation.
Who didn't have secondary education?
Yeah. Secondly, he only went to class 8. He never went to secondary school. Moi, which class? Secondary school.
Is that factual?
And look here, let me tell you something. If you had to go by that, Tom Mboya would not have been a leader in this country. He never had a degree. Kenyatta never had a degree. You know? Jaramogi Oginga Odinga never had a degree. These are great leaders.
I'm just asking you to be contextual. The reality that we face today.
The reality is, I am telling you, and I want to go to the next reason, then you'll get what I'm saying. The first is that there is no direct correlation between leadership and education. And there's evidence globally over history. The second reason is this. Once you demand that people should have a degree to be governors or presidents, what control do you have on the type of the degree they will give you? What control? They will give you any degree, any rubbish.
Provided it's
what control do you have about the university they will have gone to? Will you say, for you to bring a degree which counts in this country, it must be from the University of Nairobi? Will you say that? So, any university from anywhere, Costa Rica, any degree on anything obtained in any manner, it's a waste of time. I don't demand a degree of anybody. You can say, I was at the University of Nairobi, I'm first class student, then it emerges you never had a degree from there. Then, funga macho, fungua, you come with a degree from some crazy university in Uganda. What message are you sending to the children of this country? A country without value is not a country.
Joshua Kipto, you've worked at the county, and the law requires that a county executive committee member should have a degree.
Yes.
The same is not required of a cabinet secretary. I don't know how. But then, do you agree that we do not necessarily need a university degree for a county governor? But secondly, the question I asked him, he hasn't given me an answer, about what must we do then to ensure that you don't present your paper so close to the deadline and ponyoka with whatever you need?
Now, my answer will be 2. The first question is that let's go back and understand why this rule was placed and say the bare minimum qualification needed of a governor is a degree. I think the main reason, if I can look back to the drafters of the legislation, would be we would want some bare minimum qualification because that is an executive position. A county governor holds a significant position when it comes to the issue of controlling the resources and organizing how a county government works. The power lies significantly with the office of the governor. Any significant change that can be undertaken in a county system rests with the office of the governor. That I would assume would be the basis. Number 2, it is not factual, or it is not cut on stone that if you have a degree, whatever the degree, as Professor, my former colleague was saying about from the University of Nairobi, when it comes to the type of the degree, as long as it has been said that you need to have a degree, the idea behind this qualification is we just expect bare minimum qualification. What is an evidence we can use to showcase that you are competent enough to be able to handle? However, leadership is beyond just the paper that you hold, because leadership is a combination of so many factors, because there is also the human skills that you develop through not necessarily school, but even through the environment you grow in, the experience and which counts in a significant way. The places you've worked in, organization you've worked in, the nature of the career you've had, all those things count. So I would want to be satisfied that that qualification would be the best that can be used when you say, if you have a degree, that is enough. Number two, I want us also to have a different mindset a bit and look at how a government is run. A government is run also through not just one person, but through other people. If we can be able to ensure the people working, for example, in a system like the county, in a county system, if you have the CECs and the directors being competent and qualified, that can be able to mitigate this particular issue. More importantly, when it becomes an issue for the candidate, and you ask about the timing, one of the challenges that is happening at the moment is that, and that is the biggest problem our country faces, we don't have synergy between institutions. Who is the one to verify that this degree or this particular document you hold is authentic? IEBC was able to wiggle itself out of the situation by raising that technicality, that they lack a capacity to verify, that it is not their mandate per se. But the question they never answered is, do we have a mechanism whereby you have these agencies put together? Something that caught my attention before this issue of degree came up. You remember the issue of eligibility on matters integrity? ESCC came with its own list, a long list, and said such people must be barred from running. On the other hand, you had DPP also arguing on his end that people facing corruption charges should be barred. So you find each of these entities having their respective mandate as given by the law, but each is speaking from their corner. So that at the end of the day, have we had a multi-agency? And that was my expectation. I remember when the Chief Justice, so there was a time the Chief Justice was viciously, she was criticized why they are I think there was a question of what is the place of the executive judiciary sitting in one table, and what would be their role. I'm looking back at it and thinking, this is what IEBC should have done. If IEBC would have formed such a task, or more or less like a platform, where you have this, you have the DPP on table, you have ESC on table, you have CUE. Now that it's a requirement as per the electoral laws that one must have certain level of qualification, having CUE on the table makes it easy, so that anyone presenting, for example, a degree paper, immediately it is scanned through CUE and they're the ones to give their word. So that IEBC works with this recommendation and say, as per the mechanism we've set, we strongly rely on the entity that accredits universities, an entity that can verify the authenticity of the document. Trust me, Sam, the time issue would not have been a problem because it is a one-stop shop. That is why between me and you, when we apply for jobs, why are we tasked, for example, to go through the eCitizen platform, and we are asked to always get approval, for example, CRB, which means to show that we don't have any credit reference that is negative. I'm told to get tax compliance, which means I have to go to KRA, and KRA is the one to give me the tax compliance, so that by the time, for example, I'm appearing for a job interview, the panel has an easy time to just see the tax compliance. If they doubt the authenticity, if someone writes, for example, a complaint and say that, please take note, the tax compliance brought by the speaker is not valid, it's easy to run it through KRA because they are the custodian of the authenticity. So I find a lost opportunity in this process because IEBC is now tasked to be able to do everything. For example, they want to verify right from the degrees all the way to the KRA tax compliance, which should be a case whereby if there was a mechanism where there's a joint exercise, we wouldn't have an issue of ESCC raising its own list, DPP having its own list, then IEBC having its own list. In fact, I really empathize with the senator candidate for Kiambu, Karungo Thang'wa, because his was a case of the issue of impeachment, which is a question or an issue that is still before the courts. The jurisprudence, the jurisprudence around impeachment is still developing, and we have not fully settled that. And this is the issue I raised yesterday.
That particular matter is...
That is the basis. In fact, that is the basis why Karungo Thang'wa yesterday was...
I'm asking, the question of Karungo Thang'wa and his removal, is it still pending in court, really?
No, the issue is not subjective. The issue is, does impeachment means finality? You cannot be given an opportunity. That is the question.
What is your reading of the Constitution?
My reading would be...
clause on removal.
My reading would be impeachment, just like, for example, a conviction in a court of law, they should not be... It should not be a closed process. If, for example, I've been impeached and I've gone to court and my matter is pending, then I should be given the reason or the right to run. That is why I wanted to juxtapose these two. We have a case for Major Weluke, that is in Bungoma, who had been convicted and appealed. Now that the appeal lies in court, he's been cleared to vie. How adverse is it?
But on the constitutional provision.
How adverse is it for someone who's been impeached and still has that provision to go to court?
And the two are different, Sam.
They're totally different.
They are different, but the issue I was raising is the principle behind it. We lock you out by saying that if in 2019, 2018 you underwent this process, and in fact I can confirm, if you look at the case of Karungo Odhango, and I was looking at it, is that his matter at that time was not even conclusive. One question that was raised, can a CC be impeached? Because the CC, the county assembly can give a recommendation for the governor to consider removal. Different from, for example, impeachment proceedings for a governor. Different, for example, for impeachment proceedings for a speaker. So those are the issues I was raising, and I was saying from where I sit, and you can prove me right on this, today the same people will proceed to High Court. So the question would be, if they get a reprieve, if they get a court order and say now that the matter is before the court and to be considered, will IBC have an issue blocking?
I think let me have some say.
Can I just read a provision that I've read so many times this season?
Please.
75.3, a person who has been dismissed or otherwise removed from office for a contravention of the provision specified in clause 2 is disqualified from holding any other state office. The one you're talking about is 99.3 that talks about the disqualification of a member of parliament. It's very specific to the member of parliament, not any other part. Let me just get it there. 99, qualification and disqualification for election as a member of parliament. 3 says that a person is not disqualified under clause 2 unless all possibility of appeal or review of the relevant sentence or decision has been exhausted. And of course, clause 2 talks about a person is disqualified from being elected. A member of parliament, if the person is a state officer or public officer, has at any time within 5 years immediately preceding being a member of IBC, has not been a citizen, is a member of a county assembly, is of unsound mind, is an undischarged bankrupt, is subject to a sentence of imprisonment, and if found in accordance with any law to have misused or abused a state office or public office in any way to have contravened Chapter 6. So I don't know what gives Karungo Odhango the reprieve. The reprieve, as I've said, is... let's take it to her.
No, I just wanted to say something small about impeachment. You see, I don't know what's wrong with this country again. I'm sorry. Look, an impeachment is terminal. It creates a state like somebody has died. It's over. You know, that's the first thing. That once you are impeached, where impeach means all the process up to trial. Let's just use it loosely. You've gone through the Congress and the Senate has had the trial and pronounced itself that you are no longer President of the United States of America. It is terminal. It ends there. So now here you have Kenya with civil society and our courts that behave in very funny ways. They still want to entertain it. Because the moment you are impeached, that impeachment of the final stage by Senate, for example, you cease to be Speaker. In fact, the Deputy Governor should be sworn in immediately. Now you have our courts entertaining it. I want to inform our courts something, and Joshua, the lawyer here. An impeachment is not an entirely legal process.
It's more political.
It's not entirely legal. It's a political process. In other words, Kenyans have elected you into office, or Americans for that matter. But they have put you to work together with your colleagues, fellow politicians. On behalf of the people of America, Congress and Senate can say, please, Trump, go home. It's a political thing. And if you listen to the trial, even in Senate, even in America, even here, you don't see law, you see politics. You see Waiguru being saved because she's on the right side of the politics, and Babayao is a political process. Then you have your courts coming in.
The more reason why he's asking, is it then fair?
Impeachment is not about fairness. Impeachment is a political process and it's terminal. The moment you are impeached, that is the end of the story. Period. The next guy should be sworn in.
Okay.
And our courts should cease entertaining issues after somebody has been sent home. That's the only way you can create sanity. Otherwise, you end up with Wajir. Is it Wajir or where? Look at the suckers in Wajir. These are our courts. And for that reason, as I'm finished, for that reason, I think the thinking of that article 75, is with that in mind.
Okay.
That look here, you've been sent home. It will be, how will it really be for you to come back through the other door? They send you through the front door, go home, and you open some window and want to come in again and be the leader. That's the thinking from that explanation.
Okay, very interesting. Never mind that persons who are facing graft charges can actually move from
That is the contradiction.
Go run for office, get to the police.
I think maybe
wrong.
the answer...
That is also wrong. Please give me a second. That is also wrong. When they say you have exhausted all appeal mechanism, it doesn't stop IBC from not allowing a candidate on the basis of integrity. Your case as a legal issue must be distinguished from integrity issues that arise from the same.
But who is to measure the integrity?
And look here, Justice Mombin Ngogi has pronounced herself on that.
Right.
That the threshold for integrity should not be confused with the threshold for criminal culpability. But in other words, your case can go on. Your case can go on as a criminal case of theft.
Maybe just
if the issues the case raises are issues of integrity, if you grabbed somebody's wife and did funny things to her, and the public is it is the public domain, and we as Kenyans and the institutions that we have put in place like IBC are convinced this is not a person to be cleared, they will not clear you. But continue proceed to court and exhaust your case that may as well find you innocent. But we, from an integrity standpoint, cannot allow a rapist of your nature.
Election, there are candidates who are facing graft charges for ministries or departments they worked in, but they have gone ahead to be on the ballot on the strength that their matters are still in court, despite a very long list from the EACC and another list from the National Integrity Alliance.
Yeah, I look at this differently, that we must first of all solve a problem where our definition of leadership is transaction, ticking the boxes. Get your clearance from HELP, get your clearance from CID, CRB, and EACC. You are a person of integrity. But that is not what the society views you back home, or where you come from, or even the people you purport to be preparing to represent. So for me, I think, and that is why the drafters of the Constitution had even to include a whole Article 10 of the Constitution on national values and principles of governance. That there are about 17 of them. And one of it is patriotism, issues around equality, issues, being transparent, accountable, because accountability is also very key here, because this is also an issue of accountability. And there is a whole chapter on leadership and integrity, chapter 6, which to demonstrate that you are a practitioner or a compliant person on that particular provision is that you must produce this paperwork. And I think I agree with Professor to some extent that when you produce these papers, it doesn't mean that you are someone who is very clean. Is it, I know my namesake Joshua said that you must also discern some of these things like the budget, how governments are run and all that kind of stuff. But the ownership and practice of national values, for me, that deficiency is what is bringing all these problems. And for Kenyans to agree to say, this is how, when we elect people of integrity, is also part of implementing the national values of our country. We have this person in parliament, we have this person in the county assembly. This person is mirroring who we are. And that's why we have a mixed reactions here. We've seen some quarter of Kenyans saying that give us back our thief. Somebody who stole public money and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But you realize that these people who have questionable integrity are people who soil our leadership. Soil in the sense that they don't give us the image of the sanctity of leadership. Because leadership must be seen from an angle where people see that that is the person who is leading us, who is taking us to a particular direction, influencing us, so that our lives become better and prepare even lives for future generations.
Okay.
So that is what leadership should be. But it doesn't mean that you must produce, I don't know, from where you went, I don't know, all these things. But we've deepened. So for me, you look at the person.
Joshua, what is your assessment of the first two presidents of this country had no university degree? The second two had.
But I would also still see him.
The second two had a degree. Is there any difference that you'd say that you'd attribute to their level of qualification, or it's just about a society progressing?
Yeah, for me, I think it's also seasonal. I mean, when you look at the season of the first presidents of this country, it was about, freedom, the fight, ile ujaziri, yendi alipigania uhuru, and that belief that this is the person who edged out the colonialists and we became, free as a country. You look at this, the second presidency, of course, the Fuata Nyayo and all, and we sang, for 24 years. I mean, I grew up in that era, and we enjoyed life. I mean, the economists came later on, and you can see how Kenyans are saying this was a planner, the person who would, wherever, But we are now in an era where we need to have people.
You haven't spoken about the fourth.
About that?
You haven't spoken about the fourth.
I'll leave that to my namesake to discuss about that. Because that's a political court and I'm supposed to be non-partisan.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah. So just in conclusion is that there's a correlation between having a certain level of standards of education, just to discern some of these things. But again, it doesn't guarantee that being highly educated is synonymous that you're also a very good leader.
Okay. All right. Joshua, as you make your remark on that, we also want you to comment very briefly about the question of the violence that we saw at Jacaranda and the next phase of campaigns in the remaining 48 or so days.
Okay, so the first thing I want to say, let us just have some basic agreements. Number one, it's not a guarantee that if you have a degree, you are guaranteed to be the better leader than the one who doesn't have a degree. Leadership has proven otherwise, and that's why you are giving the first two presidents didn't have a degree, they did their bit. Leadership is it is collective in nature. You may not have exact qualification. Like, for example, being a lawyer, I may not be blessed with so much economic background because I'm not an economist, but if I run a system and be able to employ recommendations by economists, that can work. So I would want us to have that wholesome view about things. Number two, if there is such a requirement, it doesn't break a bone to just ensure that you've complied. Compliance is a testament of your ability to make things done. If I'm able to comply, if you tell me that appear with this document and I comply, that is basically an audition that if given a responsibility or a chance, I can be able to deliver. That is what I would want to say. And that's why my argument was the jurisprudence around impeachment has not fully developed, and I would feel it would be premature to permanently lock. I would rather the same go through the court channels up to the Supreme Court so that it can be settled once and for all, because that has been back and forth. We've been mixing or we've been getting mixed signals as to the place of impeachment vis-a-vis running offices, and the contradiction is what we are putting up here. How dire is it compared, for example, to convicted criminals? How dire is it when it comes to other issues? And when it comes to the issue of integrity, as you were saying, there's nothing wrong with the court pronouncing itself. That's how you're able to test the laws. When you have a law applying, going through the channel, through the courts, it helps us now settle the matter and say this is the position. And that's why, for example, previously you find even portfolio fights. National Land Commission used to struggle with the Ministry of Land as to who does what. But when the moment goes all the way to the Supreme Court, 6 years down the line, that issue has been settled. So even on this issue of integrity, issue of impeachment, issue of conviction, I would want to settle jurisprudence. And lastly on that, it is important to have a case whereby we have a multi-agency approach. It is not a one-man show. Let IBC, for example, engage the rest and have a common platform, especially during the election year. And let's give a timeline. As you are saying, which I think we've missed in this argument, the timeline was pretty short. You can imagine we are 45 days away. Most of these people facing the tribunal are already out of time. They'll have to get a court order to give them a chance or a right to be gazetted beyond the timeline. So as you had raised, and I'm happy you raised it, what was the timeline given? When should we deal with this? My proposition, the moment you have all the agencies on the table, I would even say a year before, or even 6 months is still good enough. In February, when we were asking state officers to resign to vie for position, it should be at the same time when IBC would have said, we have an ad hoc committee that has CUE, has DCI, has DPP. Anyone interested, please ensure within this period of time you have your documents. If you know you'll be possibly a DG candidate, you'll be a governor candidate, ensure 6 months too, you have this in place. And in fact, the beauty nowadays, political parties have now that I participated in a process and I was in UDA, I'm happy about political parties. I also saw the same thing for ODM. They have digitized their operations. They ask you to upload. And they're asking us to upload by March 28. So that tells you, if this had been done in conjunction with IEBC, as at now, we would be dealing with dispute about nominations and not eligibility. Lastly, you've raised the issue, which speaks to the issue you've raised about violence in Jacaranda. And IEBC made a very curious statement. The chair said, I have no capacity, I have no authority to be able to handle the issue of electoral violence, which is their primary consideration. And for me, that is a very dangerous thing, because if IBC walks away from that and that is their domain, we are, our politics.
But they are not walking away from it because they want. There is a court judgment that was given recently and said that IBC cannot summon any witness to its Code of Conduct Enforcement Committee. What are they supposed to do now?
It is not about summoning. My issue will be speak out against it and say, as IBC, in fact, because they're the ones who set up, in fact, they're the ones who are in charge of implementing the regulations, whereby their regulations demand that the elections must be in a peaceful environment. I go back to the multi-agency. They still have ability to connect or whatever, to connect with the rest and say, please help us in that. I wanted to bring this, which I think is very unfortunate when it comes to our politics of 22. I have been on record arguing vehemently that I am happy that 2022 politics has been a battle of ideas more than anything. The two coalitions, and every time we bring them on set here, the coalitions we are in, for example, in Kenya Kwanza versus Azimio, the argument has been on the agenda. If you look at our headlines, if you look at the media coverage, it has been on agenda. That's why Azimio is seen to be talking about unity. Whereas in Kenya Kwanza, we are specific that the issue is economy. If that has been what has set the tone for our campaigns, how comes at the tail end, we are having issues about the Jacaranda issue, whereby parties fight over ground? What is so difficult, for example, and I don't think it is still possible, the idea of notifying police, we don't apply to be given a right to use a ground. Rather, you just notify the police to give security. My proposition would be, this election has been done peacefully. This was the first time we had an ugly incident. Previously, the coalitions have had their days, they have had their events, they have had their activities across every part of the country without any hitch. I don't think it is time we throw out of the window and start engaging a place whereby we are fighting over venues. The last time we had that was in 2017 going back. You remember people fighting over Uhuru Park and the rest. This time my proposition would be, if we've been able to set this election to be on agenda, that Kenya Kwanza is associated with hustler economics and they're drumming the issue of economy, Azimio comes and say they want to stand with unity and issues of governance, let us fight on that, so that violence cannot be the basis.
Here we keep talking, but also there has been some other episodes of violence, maybe outside the election period, because remember there was some instance in Kondele, there was another one in Rumoru, Nyeri County, and it has happened again at Jacaranda grounds. This is actually the second time it's happening, but also raises questions about really the schedules that candidates present to IBC. I don't have much more time, but I would want to hear from each of you briefly about that question of violence. Of course, IBC says the High Court told them they cannot summon witnesses, and now it's up to the DPP to investigate, to cause investigation and probable prosecution. Is that the right place to be, bearing in mind that IBC also has so much work to do in preparing for the real substance of the election?
We don't have much time, but there's not much to say. Joshua Kiptoo, Caesar's wife must be beyond reproach. Yes. Mere suspicion is enough. Sure. The countries we die to go to, that are developed, where we die to get a visa, those countries cannot entertain the things we entertain here. Suspicion is enough for you to leave public space. There are other things for you to do in private. Now, to the violence. This election has been peaceful and it remains peaceful.
Thank you.
We must ensure that we remain peaceful now, during elections and after. We owe it to ourselves, to our country and to our children. However, when things like those of Jacaranda happen, I expect leaders to show leadership. First, if I am a presidential candidate and there are scenes such as those of Jacaranda, I may not have to go there. We've seen Raila do it many times. You may choose not to go there. In fact, the police and security, including your own security, could advise you, like in Kondele, don't go. They could advise you there are issues in Jacaranda, issues we cannot canvass here, whether one side was right or not. But according to the police, that meeting should not have taken place because both camps lay claim, sort of legitimate claim to the venue. And in the thinking of the police, that meeting ought to have been called off.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, I expect leaders to rise above things that can set the country on fire. Finally, and in the same light, I would not expect leaders to say certain things during certain times. I listened to the deputy president speaking. I said, God, this can set the country on fire because you must know who you are. Once you are Raila Odinga, you are not Raila Odinga. Once you are William Ruto, I don't know why these people don't understand it. What's coming from your mouth can burn the country. So do not charge people. When I listened to Ruto's language at Jacaranda, I said, God save this country. We are in problems. That must be avoided. A leader is he who can take pain without sharing it with the public. Because when the public sees you so chided, agitated, and the pain the way Ruto appeared to be, things can happen. So we have to avoid that. That's what it means to be a leader.
Okay. Chongoni, have the final word on this.
Thank you so much, Sami. There are two things that, if they were to be stopped in these elections, we would have a peaceful election. Number one is disinformation and misinformation. We must debunk. And everybody is falling a victim of disinformation and misinformation. And this can cause chaos. And you've seen it online. You've seen it, even media apologizing to some extent that the story was not accurate, it was not true, it was misleading, and even conversations around political rallies. And then secondly, the involvement of public servants in the elections is most likely to cause problems at the higher level and at the lower level. At the higher level, at the level of the cabinet secretaries, and at the county level in the use of public resources, because that would heighten tension, because incumbency can also disadvantage other people, and they can easily be coerced to believe that those ones that are in current positions can be advantaged to the disadvantage of the others. And I think the last bit is that the voter has the legitimacy to ensure that the elections is peaceful by saying no to violence. No to this politician who is trying to incite, and no to this particular agent who is trying to coerce the voter. The voter has the right to remain independent and make informed choices.
The last word, because that one cannot go unchallenged. If you are a victim of a violence, you cannot keep quiet. You have to speak up. I don't think there was anything wrong with Kwanza voicing the issues.
I hear you. I hear you. Thank you for raising that. Let's take a look at the feedback of what has been coming through so that we know what Kenyans are saying about the process of election. You can tweet us at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is Debrek. And Sami Kibet, you're saying that a degree doesn't matter as such in leadership, but there should be a panel to interview those seeking political seats to ascertain their understanding on governance, public administration, and how they articulate the issues. Anthony Khan, degrees should be made a must qualification down from the MCA seat to the presidency. For instance, how can a Form 4 leaver go to Parliament to make laws which should be interpreted by a 6 years degree holder in law? Well, that matter has actually been at the courts, and the court said that there was no public participation to require degree qualification for MCAs and MPs. Charlotte Rosie, leaders should go to school and acquire degrees. We don't want leaders who cannot reason academically. Such a leader cannot promote education because he or she doesn't believe in it. Reasoning is what matters. Watu wasome. But I wonder what happens, because the country as of 2019 had only 1.2 million degree holders. Frank Orinde, vetting of candidates should be taken seriously. It's part of Chapter 6 and touches strongly on the integrity of those aspiring to lead. We have witnessed certificate drama. That's a pointer of lack of integrity amongst other leaders. Truth Gauge, or Gauge, okay. Unfortunately, the degree issue will be ping-pong between the relevant authorities, and finally Kenyans will be left wondering who the ultimate authority to authenticate is. Good point. Engineer Lazaro, IBC has nothing to do with the Sonko, Sakaja and ETC tribulations. The law is very clear, is it? IBC can't bend laws to favor an individual. If someone feels like leadership shouldn't be pegged on degree, then let him go to Parliament and change it. Wow. Thank you all, Joshua Kipto, Joshua Changwoni from Kreko, and Herman Manyora here for joining us to have this conversation. And thank you, the viewer, for also sharing some of your thoughts. And this is an ongoing conversation, of course, 48 days to go to the general election, and so much to talk about, so much to prepare about. But most importantly, Kenya is bigger than all of us. Bye for now. My name is Sam Gituku. See you some other time.
Hot 96 in conjunction with Mass House